Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Hope Springs Eternal, where we're continuing our conversation from last week on reimagining suicide prevention using a MAHA approach. We have a tremendous guest lineup today. And first off, I want to welcome my esteemed co-host, Steve Brignoli.
Hey guys, thanks for joining today, and thank you for all those in attendance. Looking forward to a deep dive discussion, continuing on from our last week's discussion, which included the parents of veterans who ended their life at a VA facility. This week, we want to carry on from that message and move forward into discussion points related to that and other topics. And I'll turn it back over to JW for introduction of our guests. So thanks for joining.
As many of you may or may not know, there is a movie that just came out last Friday called SHEEPDOG, and we're very thrilled today to have one of the stars of that movie, Derek Fumusa. And Derek is very famous in the military veteran space.
JW, it's Dominic.
You're close. There's a Derek here, though.
Oh, no, shit. Oh, well, I have a brain injury too, so we're off to a great start. So I'm always good at butchering names, so that's one of the things I'm infamous for. So, well, I just combine characters into two into one. Working on efficiency.
We're all together here.
Yeah, so Dominic is famous for playing military veteran characters in some of his movies. Some of you may recognize him from the great movie 13 Hours, the story of Benghazi, where he was on the rooftop playing John Tejan. He's also famous for being in the Showtime series Nurse Jackie. And you could say that he plays the sheepdog role in the movie Sheepdog. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Also, we have with us Victor Armstrong. And Victor is a lifetime or longtime member of the National Association of Social Workers. He was the National Social Worker of the Year. And he's also been involved in many other projects around suicide prevention, including the 988 Suicide Lifeline and a bunch of other things that he'll get into here in a couple minutes. And last but not least, the original Derek Blumke, familiar to most veterans in this community, a strong advocate for veterans issues, works for the Gruntstyle Foundation, and we're happy to have him as well in this important topic. So with that, we're going to get into it. And Derek, I'd like to start with you. As I was mentioning, you've been involved in some different military roles. Tell us about how did you get involved with the movie Sheepdog, and what kind of research did you do to prepare for the role?
Go ahead, Derek.
Actually, I took a lot of prep. My background doing 13 hours really set me up for this. So I'm going to kick it over to Dominic to share more.
So Sheepdog is a movie that the writer-director Stephen Graham started researching back in 2011. He met a veteran who was working as a tow truck driver. Stephen's car had broken down. They shared a ride for 3 hours north of LA. And this driver opened up to Stephen in a way that he had never probably opened up to anybody. He hadn't talked to his therapist about it. He hadn't talked to his wife about it the way he did to Stephen. He just confided in him all the struggles he was going through emotionally, mentally, physically, and financially. And Stephen made it, it was a very profound experience, and Stephen made it a mission of his to go out and try to find other veterans like this man, to see if there were other people who were also struggling in that way. And sure enough, there were. He went all around the country, particularly Texas, Detroit, Michigan. He hooked up with VAs across the country and interviewed veterans and social workers and doctors and nurses. And it took about 10 years, but he finally got the movie made. And I was thrilled when the script came across my desk. My agent sent it to me with an offer to do it, and I jumped on a call with Stephen right away, and we hit it off. And he became like a little brother to me. And in the film, to your point, JW, I am sort of the catalyst for the story. I used to be his hockey coach in high school, and the character then becomes a cop. While he goes off to war, I become a police officer, and we will hook up again after Stephen has been arrested for getting into a fight. And I say, hey man, you know, he goes to a court proceeding, and the judge mandates a 60-day therapy that he must do, and his primary therapist is played by an Academy Award winning. Academy Award nominated actress named Virginia Madsen, who was nominated for a movie years ago called Sideways, if you know what that is. But she's a great actress, and it's filled with great actors. Vondi Curtis Hall plays a Vietnam veteran who's also Stephen's ex-father-in-law, Stephen's character's ex-father-in-law. His buddy Matt Dallas in real life plays his buddy in the film. They were in Iraq together. Anyway, it's a story about what happens to these guys, these men and women who come home and they're struggling to get back into society. Their marriages are falling apart. They're feeling isolated, and it's about a movie. It's a movie about trying to help them to reconnect and make sure that we're checking in with them. And as you've alluded to, the suicide rate among these veterans it's through the roof. I think it's 17 a day now. It's just unacceptable. And so I have had the honor and the privilege to play many soldiers in my career, including John Tigan, Tig, who was a hero in the battle in Benghazi when their camp was attacked on 9/11 in 2012. And yeah, so I jumped at the chance, man. Any chance I get to be a part of these stories, I'm going to do it because it's too important not to.
Yeah, and that's my follow-up question is, now that you've played a few of these military roles, how has that changed your personal perspective on service or the type of need that these veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan especially are dealing with?
Well, let me start by saying I have never served, but I feel very close to the military, and that my uncle, my mom's brother, served 2 tours in Vietnam, and I had the utmost respect for him. And unfortunately, when he got back in the mid 70s, he started to show signs of Parkinson's, and he passed away barely 10 years after his time in Vietnam. And we think he was made sick by Agent Orange. I mean, we there's no other explanation that makes any sense to us, because he was one of the strongest, healthiest guys you will ever find. So for that to happen to him was a real eye opener. I was just a kid, but I'll never forget it. Watching this strong man be reduced to basically a wheelchair and not, never walking again, and eventually, like I said, passing away. So I've always had a profound respect for our military and the sacrifices that they make. And as I've gotten to know more vets, that's only increased. But I think you're right. I think, it's my understanding that the good news is we're talking about it more in terms of the post-traumatic stress, but also hopefully we're finding ways to do something that our movie calls post-traumatic growth, which Virginia Madsen's character focuses on with Stephen's character. I'm not an expert. I know Victor would obviously know. He's the expert here, and all of you guys know far more than I do. But I think it's about giving the care to these men and women the way we gave the care to send them overseas, right? I mean, the deployment was thought out every step of the way. When they get back, Where's the attention to detail? Where's these resources that are there? And to answer your question, in terms of how it's changed my thought, the more I learn, the more I realize, A, I don't know. And the more I realize, B, we gotta figure it out.
Absolutely. That's why we're calling this reimagining, because the way we're doing it right now is not working. I want to throw it to you, Victor. You have 26 years of experience as a social worker. As Dominic said, one of the main characters in the movie is a social worker that comes across the main character. So talk to us a little bit about, first of all, for the audience, just kind of educate them on the difference between a social worker and a behavioral health clinician or a psychiatrist, just so people understand what that role is like. And then what's your opinion on if you work with veterans, how do we need to address the issues that they're dealing with?
Sure. Thank you. First, I want to say to anyone on the panel here who has served, as well as to veterans who may be watching, thank you for your service. I greatly appreciate the sacrifices you've made to make sure that the rest of us have freedom. So thank you. In terms of social work, I think one of the challenges is that a lot of terms kind of get used loosely. And so we think about, there are a lot of organizations who will say, we have social workers when, technically what they have is someone who addresses your social needs. And so they call them a social worker. There are folks who call themselves behavioral health counselors. We have TikTok counselors who may or may not be licensed counselors. So for me, the difference is one, social workers are trained to be social workers. I'm trained as a licensed clinical social worker. And so part of being a social worker means that you are also trained to address not just the mental aspects of what people are dealing with, but also those social drivers that can impact people's mental well-being. And I think one of the things that makes connects this to a lot of what Dominic was just sharing is that one of the challenges that we often face, I think, in working with military veterans is we have oftentimes in a lot of our modalities, we try to one-size-fits-all approach to mental health and to suicide prevention. And what I do in part with my role with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is I work with looking at how we craft resources that can speak specifically to specific communities. And so when I think about the military community, I think of it as a community. And so as you're looking at how we outreach to veterans, you have to think about how you connect with that community. We know, first of all, that, for a community, if you think about the characteristics, communities have a shared sense of consciousness. What affects you affects me. It's difficult for me as a person who does not have experience with the military as a veteran. It's going to be more difficult for me to make that kind of connection. There's an emotional connection, that connection that says, in the community, we belong together. I'm from a little small town in rural North Carolina, population about 3,000. But I went to my class reunion about 6 months ago, and walking into that class reunion, we were all immediately 18 years old again, because there's that sense of community that we belong together because we have shared experiences. Military veterans have shared experiences that the rest of us don't, and that we will never fully understand. And then there's that emotional identification, and part of that emotional identification is that there are customs, there are things that are said that mean something to people in that community that if I heard it, I wouldn't understand it. It wouldn't resonate with me. The customs, the traditions wouldn't resonate with me. Two veterans can get together and they can talk about, what it was like when you have to get up in the morning and do your daily activities. I can't talk about that because I haven't lived that. So part of what we have to think about as we're creating resources for veterans is that we need to rely on the expertise of other veterans to tell us how to create these resources. And then we also need to lean into veterans as peer specialists. We need veterans to talk to other veterans. Veterans are much more willing to hear from other veterans. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to create resources that veterans can present to other veterans. And I think that's one of the pieces that we're missing. I think the other thing is that, oftentimes, whether it's veterans or athletes or other groups, we speak to the performer. You know, we speak to the veteran, the fighter, but we forget that before that veteran was a fighter, that veteran was a person. That veteran was a human being. And so at the end of the day, we all have the same basic needs, that sense of belonging, that sense of social connection. And so we have to tap into, as we're trying to reach veterans, we have to tap into the human part of veterans and not just base our interaction on their performance, not just speak to the infantryman, or not just speak to the officer, but speak to the person. Speak to the person who is now having to be reintroduced, perhaps, to a culture and to a society where what made you a great performer in the military doesn't necessarily work in the corporate space now. And so helping that veteran to understand how, you know, even for them, how to tap into, you know, their humanity, as opposed to just focusing on those external things and those external things that they were taught as military personnel.
Yeah, that's well said, and I think that transitions quite nicely into Derek. For those of you that don't know Derek, he's an Air Force veteran from Afghanistan. He was also the co-founder and president of Student Veterans of America, and was the founding director of the National Mental Health Program for the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. So Derek's been around. He and I have crossed paths over the years, tangentially, without actually ever really meeting face to face, but our programs have overlapped for sure. So let's talk about what he was talking about, humanity, and what role does health and the way that the VA treats PTSD or depression or anxiety or any of these mental health ailments. Let's talk a little bit into that aspect, because as Dominic said, we got to avoid the one size fits all.
Absolutely. Jay, great to be with you. Victor, the whole crew here, great to meet you all. Dominic, I watched your film yesterday. I've been encouraged to watch this for probably 6 months. I had a couple of folks that watched this at a screening a while back, and they said that based upon my work, I just had to see this thing. And I don't want to give any spoilers, of course, but it landed kind of right on my front doorstep. And a couple of times I had to kind of like just pause and like cry and like just really process this.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely wonderful in this film. Just an absolute anchor of the film, and you and your co-star, the director, they're just absolutely wonderful. There's a opening scene though that I will talk to. I don't want to. This is, I think, something that was kind of touched on, and I think it's probably one of the more critical points of the film. The lead character gets himself in trouble, and as he's dealing with I believe either the judge, or he's in, I think maybe the exam room with you. They start rattling off the medications that he was on. First, a couple of antipsychotics, a couple of antidepressants. As you listen, this guy's on like 6 or 7 different psychiatric drugs. And this theme, when we talk about needing a retailer, the way we do mental health to be focused on the individual, the human, we also need to be talking about human rights. And what we have right now is an epidemic of veteran suicides that is, I believe, largely been driven by an epidemic of overprescribing, in that 70% of all veterans under VA care are prescribed a psychiatric drug. Most of these medications have box warnings for suicide. I won't go into the back and forth, because they say suicidal thoughts and behaviors, not suicide. Well, grow up, everybody. Like, the box warning's on there for a reason. It's not because it doesn't make you think about suicide or doesn't possibly cause suicide. Right. So I get hung up on that, but I think it was just a super important moment that isn't really followed out throughout the film. But if you were to follow the story of a veteran, and that veteran, you'll find that this is the theme of our generation. And it really began, I think, going back to the Vietnam vets when they came home, and the epidemic of benzodiazepines at that time. And so where I have my background working in mental health, starting Student Veterans of America, I was inspired to work in mental health because I had a veteran that killed himself at one of our chapters not long after we got started. And I kind of felt like the commander that had this crisis on his hands, but didn't have the resources to make it stop. And ultimately, I didn't understand the problem at that time. I didn't understand the role of these medications that might be driving this. And that when you start looking at doubling and tripling of suicide risk for either completions or attempts, suicidal thoughts from the box warnings from the drug makers, what we have is basically a prescribed crisis. And the arguments and pushback are just kind of fascinating because a lot of them come from the mainstream mental health organizations, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, historically NAMI. We also had National Association of Social Work, Mental Health America. Recently, they signed against a bill, signed a letter opposing a legislation that would require written consent when prescribed psychiatric drugs at the VA. And where this is problematic is that many of these groups are taking money from the drug companies. Many of them, that's their sole source of revenue or their primary sources of revenue. And what we find is real financial conflicts of interest, but also intellectual conflicts where many people on Capitol Hill, shockingly, are stressed or depressed and themselves are on a medication. And so I was in a meeting last week with a Senate staffer and asked why they were opposing the bill. And they shared that it was because they felt that this medication, if a piece of paper had been presented in front of them when they were prescribed the medication they felt has been saving their life that they're on today, that they might not have taken that life-saving medication. And where this comes back to is human rights. And the Nuremberg report that came out of that, out of World War II and the atrocities of the Nazis and experimenting on humans and torture and all these things. And where we have this today is experiments largely that began really on veterans with antipsychotics in the 50s, lobotomies of veterans in the 50s, and going forward, where patients are not being informed. We've got investigations showing that at the VA and a couple health systems, most patient records do not show documentation of informed consent. A young man was 22 years old or 23 years old, killed himself 3 years ago. OIG, the Office of Inspector General of the VA, found that no documentation of informed consent was shown. And the provider even shared that she did not discuss the box warning for this medication for that young man. And so really, I think what we're talking about is, one, there's a huge gap in the transition. And we're also just not really looking at the root causes. And so like my example, and I'll turn over to the rest of the folks kind of for the discussion here, but I was deployed twice to Air Base in southern Uzbekistan. It was the launch pad for our operations in Afghanistan for Special Forces. I was there in 2001. This base was the site of 2 tactical nukes detonating there in 91. We didn't know that. It was a chemical weapons depot for the Russians for 20 years, and we didn't know that. And now, fast forward almost 20 years after my deployments, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor 5 months ago. And instead of getting the care and the scans done that really needed to be done, instead pills were thrown at me, and I wasn't given the treatment that I really needed. And I think that's a story of many veterans, whether it's toxic exposures or traumatic brain injuries, as discussed in the film. I just think that where we're at today is a place where we can do better, but we can only do better if we're honest with ourselves and are really looking at the mirror of why is our suicide rates for young veterans, 18 to 34-year-olds, doubled, and have this growth chart that looks like Facebook's growth in its earliest days, unabated. And it means that we're doing something wrong. It must come down to the way we're doing screening or outreach or the way we're doing care. And so I think we're a great point in history with a lot of the conversations coming out of MAHA. I think I might have missed you down there, Kyle, last week for the nutrition announcement, but where we're at is, I think, a point of hope for many people because we're really looking at the systems and saying, is what we're doing working? And I think that the film and the work that everybody here is doing is starting to drive us in that direction.
Yeah, and just so for our audience's edification, the base that Derek is referring to is affectionately or unaffectionately, depending on your perspective, known as K2 in Afghanistan, and it was ground zero for the toxic exposure problem. And for many of us that worked on that toxic exposure task force, it was quite a journey, and we lost a lot of guys during that process. Mm-hmm. As all you guys know, we here at Life Aid are really working hard on trying to create an alternative program to the current medical, clinical, pharmaceutical approach to suicide prevention. So I'm going to throw it to you, Steve, and let's talk a little bit about alternatives. And then there's some other things about the movie that I want to get into.
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, the biggest thing is a pivot away from the, petroleum-based pill to what creates purpose-driven life, right? So, I mean, when we watch TV and we see, these pharmaceutical ads, and half of the ad, it has to be dedicated to the side effects. I mean, anytime you introduce something chemically to the body that is it's either exciting or dwarfing a receptor. So, anytime you do that chemically, it's going to have side effects, and those side effects can be compounding and chronic. Whereas, the direction we're looking to take is, performance-based, exercise-based, environmental-based, mental, spiritual, and that's a pivot away from the current solution set that honestly works for folks who make money on those type of products, and also delineates risk for organizations that would have to take time to figure out how to repivot and redirect veterans toward being beneficial in society outside of what they did for the military. Some of the things that we're looking at include a facility that would be first and foremost of its kind for mental health, with an environment very similar to some of the premier places you see, whether it's Asylum, California, or ashrams, where there's environmentals that veterans can finally be able to relax in and focus on themselves. So you need to isolate, and then it's an immersion process to pivot that programming from the downward spiral they're in with pharmaceuticals and start to come out of the hole. And part of that includes, how do we broaden that to a state level? We're looking at different co-use opportunities with different armories and National Guard units to be able to localize and create communities of interest across different states. So, John, we've been walking the hill for, I think, 2-3 weeks straight now, between different, whether the Cannon building or the Hart building, to meet with different congressional representatives to help support and develop the constituency to the cause that we know with your program works. You've saved over 40,000 veterans with only one suicide in over 17 years. So that's called a metric, and that's called a working metric. And so happy to obviously bring everybody together behind that, create facilities and communities behind that, and keep moving forward with this until we bring the number of 17 a day down to 0. With that, I'll pivot back over to you, JW.
If I could add something, I
Sure.
love a lot of what Steve was sharing, because I think one of the things that we need to think about with suicide prevention is it's not enough just to give people a reason not to die. We have to give people a reason to live.
Correct.
And so that means, creating resources and things that help them feel like they're part of humanity. And I think that's part of what we're missing, is that we take the youth, we take the energy of these veterans, and then once they're done and they come back home, we don't treat them with humanity. We treat them oftentimes like, thank you for your service, and then we move on. And so I think what you're describing, what you're doing there in creating something that says to them, we see you, we value you, we thank you, and not just saying it in words, but also saying it in deeds, is extremely important. Part of suicide prevention is about helping people to feel a sense of social connection. If people don't feel like they're connected to society, that is going to be one of the building blocks of mental distress and possibly of suicidal thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
There's
was
a-
just going to say, sorry.
No,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say that social connection piece is incredibly important. And when Georgetown University did a study on our program, there were two metrics that really stood out. One was that 67% of the program participants reduced or eliminated their prescription drug use. And the other one was that unlike other interventions where you revert to the mean over time, people continued to improve or sustain the gains that they had in the intervention. And the primary reason for that was the social connection network that was created in the program. And if you go on any social media, the veterans still talk about it to this day. Go ahead, Dominic.
No, I was just going to say, this is so great to hear you guys talk about all this. Victor, there's a line in our movie that Virginia Madsen says to Stephen's character. She says, "You were willing to die for your country. How about now being willing to live for it?" And that's exactly the point there.
Yep.
And I want to say, Derek, you touched on something that is really interesting. I've probably done, I don't know, maybe 100 interviews about this movie over the years, and I don't think anyone's brought up the medicine yet. And it is important, and it occurs to me there is a moment in the film where Stephen, I don't know if you remember this, but Stephen reaches up in his medicine cabinet and he tosses a bunch of medicine into the toilet. Do you remember that?
I do, and it horrified me. I think Victor
Horrifying.
knows exactly why it was horrifying. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but horrifying, but if I'm understanding you correctly, maybe a positive development.
Horrifying in that I kind of did that myself.
Okay.
And so I when I was on a sick drug cocktail, that's how I kind of came into this work. And I had a background in, like, I was a founding committee member of the National Action Alliance on Suicide Prevention. I built a national mental health program for the VA. So, like, I got a fairly extensive background in mental health and national programming. And even still, I fell into this trap of started with Adderall, then gabapentin for anxiety, 2, 3, 4 other drugs later. I'm on Zoloft. My career is, this rocket ship of a career is now just scorchingly on fire. Company that I started in New York is on fire. Wound up couch surfing and basically the VA's definition of homeless the next 2 years, basically. And this was bizarre because, like, I had the phone number of the VA secretary at the time, but I just didn't feel capable of even making a phone call to anybody for the help that I really needed. And where that moment was horrifying is that I thought I'd followed a taper as I should have, because I no longer trusted the doctor that prescribed me these drugs, because I went back to him and he kind of said, I've never had somebody with as many many issues with these medications as you, which I responded, maybe I'm just the one that came back. And I followed the guidelines, what was written on the pamphlet and what I'd read online through the prescribing guidelines. And I tapered over the course of about a month, and took my last dose and thought I was fine. Symbolically, the next day, I flushed all my pills down the toilet. What people don't tell you about is antidepressant withdrawal or benzodiazepine withdrawal. Mine was SSRI, it was a Zoloft. And the next day I started feeling like flu-like symptoms. The day after that, I started having like bolts of lightning, felt like they're hitting me in the head, black blips of time vanishing in those lightning strikes, dizziness, nausea. I felt like I was going on interstate at 80 miles an hour, the back two windows down. I felt like my head was going to explode. And the paranoia. I mean, I took my parents and I went out to breakfast one of those mornings before it got severe. And during at the diner, I believe someone was listening to our conversations. I'm kind of scoping the diner out, looking for spies. We get outside and I take their phones and I put all of our phones in my car and I sit down in their car with them and proceed to tell my parents that the drug industry had ahead of my life, and that we were all in danger. And like, those are the moments you can't like, things you can't take back, because I can imagine how horrified my parents were. But this is like, we know this stuff is caused by these meds, like it's on the literature. And so what I did is I actually unintentionally forced myself through acute antidepressant withdrawal, an experience called akathisia. And for anybody who's gone through that, they know that that is the most horrific thing you can go through in your life. Even for my friends served in combat, probably like Steve and a lot of his friends. You go through this experience, you will do anything to make it stop, anything. And this is what's driving a lot of these deaths, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that's what I went through. And that was the moment where I watched that film. I was just like, oh, dude, just don't, man. Like, this is going to go south fast. And that's what I expected. But I don't think when they were doing the research on the film, I don't think they realized how important that moment was. And that when he just flushed those pills, there would have been consequences for that action if he was on those drugs for a period of time.
You're right. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Stephen did such extensive research, but that in making the film, I have to be honest, this prescription medicine side to it was not something that it wasn't always front and center.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think one of the challenges though is that it's like everything else. Medication is not all bad, but there are a lot of abuses of medication, and there are people, if they're prescribed the right thing in the right amount, that medication can help. I think that the challenge is that oftentimes, for one, the side effects of psychotropic medications are terrible, and so that's one of the challenges. One of the things that we know. There are also a lot of prescribing folks, are the psychiatrists included, who don't fully understand suicide or psychopathology in general. And so you have people prescribing medications that are really they're prescribing medications to address the symptoms that they're seeing, but they don't understand what they're looking at, and that medication may not be the thing that is going to address this individual's challenges, but it's all that person knows. It's like if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. If all you know is medication, it's like going to an orthopedic doctor who only knows surgery. So and I think that's part of the challenge, is that we need better education, including education for clinicians, in how to deal with people who are experiencing PTSD and deal with people who are experiencing suicidal thinking, and in how to address those social drivers. One of the challenges in the way that our system is built is that you can bill for prescribing medication quicker than you can bill for prescribing housing or prescribing food and those kinds of things. And those are some of the challenges that we're facing. And so we're getting a society that's overly medicated because that's the one tool, the one resource that we have, and it can be a lucrative tool for people to use.
Yep.
It's the easy button. It's the
Yeah.
easy button mentality. And so the issue is that there's alternatives to prescription drugs, like in the whole thing that like we've been doing with what we call the MAHA approach, where you're looking at diet, nutrition, exercise. It's about healthy lifestyle. A lot of these different things can be addressed. And then to your point about root cause, as you guys know, I created an app that measures behavioral health risk, and it can identify the top 30 or 40 root causes that lead to high suicide ideation. So that self-awareness really helps users understand their health and how to take action and connect with people so that they can actually do something to improve their life.
Mm-hmm. I think what Victor kind of landed on with the training, I think you could not be more correct in that. Like, I just 6 months ago had another two VA doctors within 2 months wanted to prescribe me an antidepressant, and I shared that I was trapped on Zoloft fear and had a horrific year-long withdrawal from Zoloft. And when I said that, she looked at me and said, "I've never heard of that before." And for you and your colleagues, Victor, like social workers and psychologists, and your training, I'm probably going to take the words verbatim what you were told, which was medications. You are not trained in medications. This is not your lane. That is doctors. That is psychiatrists. Am I missing anything there?
No, you're spot on.
And you're the one that's seeing the patients most often. And you're the one that most likely to catch what akathisia, for example, or say somebody started on an SSRI and they have a manic episode in the next week following that prescription. You'd be able to catch that and say, okay, this is an adverse drug event and it's not bipolar, because now we're seeing mania and depression in the same patient. And I missed the diagnosis. Instead, this is very simply solved by education and re-education over, frankly, our entire medical establishment. The pharmaceutical industry's influence over medical schools. Doctors are coming out of medical school today. not knowing about antidepressant withdrawal, not having understood the term akathisia. And so until we get those points corrected, I don't think we're going to be able to really even begin to solve this problem, especially when we look at prescription rates at VA and nationwide, the civilian population. There's a 130% increase in prescribing antidepressants to adolescent girls from 20 to 21. And now we're seeing issues of persistent sexual dysfunction, issues connected to libido as a whole, and basically preventing some people, especially in their youth, from even sexually developing as an adult. And so I do have a question for the group, is that
well, I'd like to just comment on that, because the number one, well, the two most prevalent side effects to PTSD medications are, one is suicide ideation and the other one is sexual dysfunction. So just going out there.
Which can be a
It's talked
secondary
about
service disability that the government would pay you for because you developed this secondary to your primary diagnosis or your primary disability. Yes.
Well, it leads to a lot. It's one of the issues that's led to a lot of divorce in the veteran community. That's why I bring it up.
Yeah. The question I have for the group, I think, would be is like, I don't know if we're all kind of that age, we might remember this, but historically journalists did not report on suicides because we found that there were suicide clusters would pop up. You have one suicide in one small town and that is reported on, and then the neighboring town has another suicide a week later. Today, when you call the VA or you pretty much go anywhere, it's, are you thinking about harming yourself? Have you thought about suicide? These things. Could it be possible that our messaging around this is also causing part of the problems that we're experiencing? Because we've been throwing money hand over fist at outreach campaigns, come get help, come get help, come back, get help. And under our current paradigm of care, as we've discussed, is primarily medication based. That's like the first frontline treatment for depression, for example. Do we think that we're actually planting ideas in people's heads by doing these aggressive outreach campaigns and the billions of dollars that we've spent? Or do we think that we're everything's working? Or I'm just kind of want to pose that because as we were talking, it kind of struck me as, are we potentially planting ideas in people, the seeds in people's heads that might be driving them in a direction that we actually wanted the exact opposite?
So,
No,
you know, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
No, I was
you
gonna
know, you go.
Nate, no, you go.
Go ahead, Victor.
Okay. I think that I think there's two ways of looking at that. I mean, number one, I think the way that we make it okay for people to reach out when they're in need of help is we have to normalize the conversation. So we make it easier for people to feel like it's okay to say that I'm not okay. I think the challenge though is in normalizing the conversation, we can in some ways minimize the conversation. You know, we can make it feel like, well, if everybody's got mental health issues, and I'm no different from anybody else. If everybody's taking medication, then it's okay for me to take medication. So I think for me, the challenge is not in that we're oversaturating society with the message. I do think we need to tweak the message, you know, and I think that we need to also understand that there's a difference between awareness and education. We do a much better job of awareness. We do a good job of saying there's a big problem out there. It's a crisis. It's an epidemic. We don't do as good a job of talking about, and here's what we need to do about it, or even bringing people together to have that conversation about, you know, how we need to deal with it. So I think we absolutely have opportunities to address this differently, but I am one that's I am a huge proponent for having the conversation, for letting people know there are people out there that you can talk to, because one of the worst things that can happen to you if you are experiencing suicidal thinking is to find yourself in isolation and not feel like you have anybody you can reach out to. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it's similar to the medication question. I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. We get so gung ho about doing something that we end up doing the wrong thing or going overboard with it and not ever dialing it back and even taking inventory to say, is what we're doing working? And if it's not, we do something different. And I'll say this, and then I'll stop. I will say too, and I work in the suicide prevention space. We have not done a good job with any community in addressing suicide. And so, you know, we have clearly missed the mark in our veteran community. But when you look at, our work around in reducing suicides just across the board, we have not done a great job with that. And I think part of that is in the messaging. I think part of it also is there are a lot of things that we are doing in society and in community with each other that are adding to the problem, because we are, as I think, as a country, I don't know that I've ever seen a time in my lifetime, and I've been alive a long time, that we've been more divided in a lot of ways than we are now. That's again a recipe for social isolation. And so I think all those things are part of the challenge as well.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that we need to balance the message. To your point a little bit, Victor. Recently, I was bestowed this award, and I got to give a speech at the Kennedy Center. And one of the things that I really wanted to message was we don't talk enough about mindset, and we don't talk enough about like hope and purpose, like what Steve was talking about before. And I think one of the things I said at that speech was we need to really focus on people. What is your mindset? What is your motivation? What is your mission? And I gave two examples. I gave one example of this Air Force veteran, and he was missing part of his arms and part of his legs, so he was classified as a quad amputee. And Delvin had this desire to ride a regular upright bike, and asked us to come up with a way to adapt that bike. And so I used him as an example of someone who has had really good motivation, really good mindset, really good mission. He had that hope and purpose. And then the other one is someone that I think everyone's familiar with, which is Clay Hunt. And he was very conflicted, and he struggled with the mindset, the mission, and the motivation. And one of those guys is thriving, and one of those guys is not. And I think that's kind of like, what's that message about hope and purpose that we need to instill that goes along with, hey, if you are struggling, there is help available. And that's one of the things that we want to do with our SOAR project is have what we call a customer service line or a veteran support line that's not necessarily the crisis, but to Victor's point about what is the root cause, getting after it. A lot of guys struggle, as you know, Derek. There was just a kid, 30-year-old Marine who ended his life at the San Antonio VA because the VA wasn't addressing his needs around his disability rating. And so, like, you got to be able to help guys with what they need help with, and that's I think very critical, and something that I think a theme in the movie actually also, Dominic, is the main character was like, I want to wake up in the morning and feel something.
Yeah. In the therapy sessions, she talks about how you are, quote unquote, normal, but what you went through is abnormal. That your combat, your experience in battle, you're going to come home and most people around you aren't going to understand it. And so, to me, as an actor, what I do is all about communication. It's all about talking. We love to talk. It's what we do. And that to me is there's so many components to this, and maybe medicine is part of it. I'm sure it is for many. Exercise has saved my life. I tell my kids, the best antidepressant is a 5-mile run. I mean, I always, to this day, feel better after I work out. I mean, it literally is, my saving grace, my reset every day. And if I didn't do that, when I can't do that, I really feel a difference. But I think the first step, and again, I'm coming at this as a layman. I don't have any professional experience, of course, but if we can talk about it and let people, let these men and women know that they matter, our veterans matter, and that, you know, there are people who care and want to be available to help, to get that conversation started is so important. Because like everyone has been saying, the worst thing that can happen is that you feel isolated and you're not in regular communication with the people who are there and want to and do care. We care as a country, hopefully, but hopefully there are people in each, because everything's local, right? So who are the people in your community?
Yeah.
Because it's going to take your family, it's going to take your neighbors, it's going to take, and the other message of this movie is, and to the points that have been made, these, you know, Steven's character says, I want to go out and I want to see my men. You know, I want to talk to the guys that know what I went through. I want to reach out and revisit and be with them again. And that's critical too, isn't it?
To go back, kind of on the purpose point, but I just want to go back to this. JB, you and I have talked about Clay. We both knew Clay. You knew Clay quite well. I had only met him a few times, but in our discussions, it sounded like medications also were a problem. In Clay's example, he moved back from LA to Texas, and it sounds like they were switching up his meds. Ricky Ramos, who we talked about, that young man that killed himself in front of the San Antonio VA, and that was a second suicide in front of the building in 8 months. And the one before that was Mark Miller. His dad's Larry Miller, an emergency medicine doc, and he was prescribed Seroquel right before he left the building, and he had a suicide attempt a decade earlier and attributed that to an SSRI he was prescribed. But Ricky, his aunt, in a news report, felt it was inappropriately prescribed or prescribed the wrong medication. And so this medication issue, like, it keeps coming up over and over and over and over again. And so I'm with the purpose, I'm with the hope, I'm with all of these things. But I think that we can't beat this thing to death enough, because I don't feel like we're at a point where the experts around the country are standing up and saying something about this. And instead you've got, frankly, smart and loud asshole representing a spinoff nonprofit of a t-shirt brand, is the group that's kind of platforming this issue. And that's kind of insane and absurd. We've got these big professional organizations that are out there that we kind of lean on and trust to be addressing these issues. And so I just want to kind of bring that back, because that sounds like Clay. That was an issue with Clay. It was certainly an issue with both those suicides in San Antonio. And we actually held an emergency briefing right after that latest death for the San Antonio community, because it was clear they didn't understand what was going on. And then we had a meeting with the VA mental health and leadership there, where it looks like they're going to be providing training to all of their providers on medication safety, informed consent, because it's clear there's major gaps in training and education on this stuff. So I'm a downer. I apologize, guys. It's dark.
No,
it's sad.
yeah,
It's
but
a it's a realist
Well, I
position.
mean, look, like I said, one of the things in that Georgetown study that I'm most proud of is that 67% of our participants, and we had one on our very first podcast, this kid, Juan Alcivar, he was on 15 meds when I met him. And within 6 months, he was on 0. And he held up bags. The VA still sends him meds, even though he doesn't take them.
Yeah, we need to make an art piece installation, if you don't mind, for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible, the stories that I've heard over the years about and amazingly, if you get healthy, you don't need the medications, or if you address, to Victor's point, the root cause. Like, if the reason you're depressed is because you don't have a job, then we got to get you into job training so you can get a job. And not, no SSRI is going to fix that. No SSRI is going to help you get a job. And so I use that as an example all the time, but there's many more examples. Let's say you're having relationship problems, which is also very common. Or you're underemployed, or you're just struggling because the VA is not listening to you. I mean, we talked about that on our meeting last week with the parents and Larry Miller. Dr. Miller was one of our guests. I pose the question, are we listening to the people we're trying to help? There's one other thing in the movie that I want to hit on before we run out of time. In the movie, the main character was talking about the relationship he has with the civilian population. And I think, Dominic, you brought it up, I think, earlier on. To what extent does the public have a role? And what do you think is the public perception of veterans with PTSD?
Wow.
Oh, and one follow-up. How does the movie help or hurt that perception?
Well, let me start with that. I mean, I hope, let me say this. We made the movie for veterans. And we made the movie for everybody, but first and foremost, if the response from the veteran community was not positive, then we knew that we hadn't done our job. Luckily, thankfully, it's been very much mostly positive, and that's been very rewarding for us. But to your question, the civilian population has to be a part of this. Certainly, the families of veterans are a part of it. We know that. That's huge. And we've had so many great responses from wives and brothers and sisters of our vets as well. But I can speak. I'll just speak as myself here. I'll just speak as Dominic, not the actor. But it's absolutely unacceptable. I mean, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but the idea that we are willing to take a volunteer Army and Navy and send them overseas and ask them to protect us and then not care about them when they get home. I mean, that's unconscionable. I don't have the answers, JW, obviously, but I do know that we've got to be a part of it too. And I think, films can do a better job of bringing this to our attention. I mean, the medium of film is so powerful, and television, of course. We've got to just tell these stories. I mean, that's the first step. Just talk about it and let people know the statistics. When I heard the number 17 a day, I mean, that's mind-boggling. It's just awful. It's not acceptable on any level. And again, I don't know how we fix the problem. I just know that there's not a problem in the world that can be fixed if you don't first know that it exists and you start to address it in some way. But I'd like to think that as a civilian and as someone who lives in, probably, I mean, obviously I know I'm in touch with many military members, both active and retired, but day to day, I'm not dealing with it. I'm not in that world on a day-to-day basis. But I'd like to think that those of us who aren't a part of it directly still take a very strong interest. And I don't know. I hope I'm making sense. I just think it's just a big deal, and it doesn't get enough attention. And it's not. And the other thing I want to say before I stop is this is not a political issue, in my opinion. This is not. I mean, as Victor said, and as others have said, we're divided in many ways in this country. This should not be something that divides us at all. We have to come together. This isn't Republican or Democrat. This is everybody. And we have people who are suffering on both sides of this. It's not something that you have to look at, in my opinion, through a political lens. It doesn't matter. We're Americans. We've got to take care of Americans. That's what this is about, especially those who are willing to sacrifice their lives for us.
If I could say real quick, I think it also goes back to something Derek mentioned earlier about the messaging. I think part of the the mindset of society is that we have normalized veterans having PTSD. So there's an expectation that veterans coming out of active duty are going to have PTSD, and we've accepted that. And I think the other and part of what makes that even more appalling is it is post-traumatic stress disorder. It does not have to become a disorder, and it is post-trauma, which means what we're really talking about is how we introduce veterans back into society. And if the stress is coming once they enter back into society, that tells us we are dropping the ball somewhere on how we are introducing and welcoming veterans back to society. And so there's something that's occurring between that discharge and introducing them back into society that we have got to address differently.
Well, and that's kind of the point of my first part of the question I posed is if you're a civilian and you have no, you don't have no history of family history of being in the military, you're just a regular civilian, and some veteran walks up to you and says he has PTSD, what's your immediate reaction? And I would say, just based on what I know and have seen, that civilian's reaction is going to be, I would say, mostly negative or mostly positive, right? It's going to be mostly negative. And that's part of the thing that I think, to your point about stress, increases the stress is that, like, do you think the guy's going to, I had this conversation with Steve yesterday. Do you think that if a veteran, if Steve walks up to you and Steve's talking about his PTSD, do you feel like he's going to hurt you? He's going to harm you somehow? He's going to go harm somebody else. Well, what's your perception? And I would say, because of the suicide issue, especially, the perception of a normal civilian is going to be that guy's crazy, instead of, hey, are you getting the help you need? Or how's your purpose? How's your hope? What's your mindset? Like, that's a potential Derek re-education thing that needs to get done too. Is I think society, American society, for civilians that have no connection to the military, when they hear PTSD, it's like, oh, that guy's a danger.
Yeah, I actually want to kind of share a frustration I have with this. And by the way, Steve, you and I shouldn't be having these offline jokes, because no one else is going to get them. They're just going to think we're monsters. Military humor is dark and dark. Dominic, I think you've been around this crowd long enough at this point.
Oh, that's the first thing I learned, man. When I started hanging out with Tig and Oz and those guys, I mean, the dark jokes.
Quick and bad. The stigma that I actually think that, kind of, as you're talking about how people view veterans, I think, like we talked about earlier, that moment in the film with the medications. I mean, I don't want to share everything for those who haven't watched the film, but he got himself in trouble for beating somebody up, and at the end of the day, like, that's kind of like the shtick that we kind of get nailed with, is that we can be violent, we're suicidal because we have this combat trauma, where we have quick access to guns, which frankly isn't always wrong. But to that end, like, I think we've been making our veteran community appear insane for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think the Vietnam generation, I think that, in addition to just like a betrayal of those folks when they came home, and the way that they were not welcomed home, as the film kind of also points out again, is the crazy behavior. Like, when you look at many of these medications, benzos is a great example of this. That's what we were doing to the Vietnam vets. And in addition to their combat trauma, they're being prescribed something that can make them appear like they're nuts. And I think that this has hit our generation, Steve and ours generation, in very much the same way. And I'm not saying that combat trauma is not real. And I don't think anybody would ever take that as that's what I'm saying here. And I'm also would never say that drugs are bad. I would never say that we should take these drugs off of the market. What I would say is what Victor pointed out is better education for providers, much better education, informed consent for patients. That is a human rights issue. But at the end of the day, how our country looks at our community, the veteran community, I think has been given a black eye. And you look at many bad conduct discharges. You look at some of these acts of violence. There's 2 veterans who within 48 hours of each other at the Chico VA clinic, both killed their mothers. Turned out that the clinic was short on psychiatric prescribers, and they couldn't keep up with their caseload. And one had just ran out of meds, it appears, and one stopped. And if you look at their case history, it's just like, it's clear that they were going through acute drug withdrawal. And it can mimic psychosis. Yep. It makes you look like there's something else going on. And so I think that's something I think as we go forward in books and in film and in social media campaigns, I think that's something that I think we need to work and spend some time on, is addressing that, because I think that our community has gotten a bad rap in that regard. And I think that there's been an injustice, I think, in many ways. And you look at active duty troops in the last year before discharge, there's a study showing like 37 to 43% of troops are prescribed a psychiatric drug in their last year before discharge. That's huge.
Well, I think the whole thing just needs a complete, and it's very tough to move an aircraft carrier by yourself, like swim out to the aircraft carrier, but it's a lot easier to pivot it. So part of this, part of the stigmatism is kind of designed in. It's almost like UX UI, like an interface, because it should be like PTSD, like post-traumatic stress challenge. The second you say disorder, people are like, oh, there you go. It's like, drive, brake, neutral. Oh, we're in park here. So part of the stigma has kind of been emancipated throughout histrionics of books and films and media. And it didn't mean to be in a bad way necessarily, but people who it's kind of this relational aspect. Veterans look at movies like Platoon, you name it, and they're like, they absolutely get that aspect of it, and they love because they're kind of back in that mindset, right? But that's a mindset that folks who haven't been in the military can't attune to. So we have to meet in the middle. It's not necessarily all the veterans' job to be like, hey, okay, so I saw some stuff and I burnt some garbage, and there's a lot of other things that, but at the same time, it doesn't need to be all on the civilian side where it's like, thank you for your service. And I'm getting kind of like this PTSD fatigue, dealing with, okay, we get it, combat, you're a vet, and we get it. So I think both sides, if we create a little bit better of a balance point, if we look at something like PTSD, well, I know PTSD, what's PTSD? Just asking the question automatically evacuates what they were about to think about the veteran. They're like, whoa, what's PTSD? Oh, it's a challenge. It's just the fact that, I went through the following things, but now I'm part of a program and we're always physically active and we're doing all these things. So it took it from PTSD, and now it's more like PTSD. Can I learn more about that? I mean, so the second you get people engaged into the question, and it just changes what they're about to think into, well, wait a second, what's that about? I think that would tangentially help strategically from that perspective. And we have to do the same with meds. It needs to be almost like a, meds are a last resort, or I was thinking of something like a med timer. Hey, you're supposed to take your 12 different meds at this time, this time, this time, this time, this time. Okay, on our program, we want you to wait 5 extra minutes. And then a week later, 10 extra minutes. Now, obviously under guidance, right? Because, oh my God, there's a little bit of chemistry involved, obviously. And of course, pharma will not be happy with that because, DOW traditionally has been their kind of proving ground for things. However, things that just pivot, like stopping, it's such a hard thing, or change, but pivoting to where number one, anything that asks more questions is good. And then number two, anything that delineates the need for what we know is the crux of the problem, which is people are over medicating or making their own decisions on additional medications. They're compounding with external factors like alcohol, street drugs, you name it. And I think that approach will start to provide a much better efficacy and then advocacy throughout time. And I just wanted to open that up for thoughts.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me, man. I mean, you know, I can't remember, maybe it was JW who, somebody referenced orthopedics. You know, I played football and I hurt my knee, and, you know, I was told, you know, you can have surgery or you can do some really great rehab. And I went rehab. My buddies who had similar injuries, they did surgery. Their knee was never the same again. You know, I mean, it's medicine is obviously an important tool in all of this.
Sure.
But the mind-body connection is a very real thing. And like I was saying, you know, exercise is a medicine. Exercise is as important as any of it. And it makes total sense to me. Like, yes, these drugs help. They can help. But maybe waiting, you know, I mean, there's obviously not one size
Sure.
fits all. But
Sure.
that makes sense to me, man. I have to say, as someone who, I mean, I don't have any medical training. I need to be clear about that. But I've lived, you know, over 50 years now, and I've experienced a lot of different things, both emotionally and physically. And that just putting things into our body, you know, it can be a great thing, but it's got to be thought out, and there are other things that are equally important, I think. And
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
is equally
Talking
important.
is great.
It is.
One of the best things, to your point, you know, we had a general that used to come out and ride with us from the Special Operations Command, and he always used to say the best prescription drug on earth is a bicycle. And, you know, the point is the same thing. You're talking about exercise. You know, if you can create a healthy lifestyle and try to get at the root cause, a lot of these issues go away, and there's not a need for medication. The second thing is, I believe that medication is designed, or was intended in its original use at least, to be a temporary solution, not a permanent solution. And unfortunately, we use it as a permanent solution now, where we get these guys on these drugs and then they get addicted to them. And then with all the different side effects, like to Derek's point, he was on 6 or 8. And, you know, most of our program participants, when they come into the program, are on 8 or more, most of them in double digits. And that was like, when I first started doing this, I was like stunned that was the case, because usually if you're taking an antibiotic, you take, you know, you get your 10 pills, you take your 10 pills and you're done. And so this idea that you're taking some kind of narcotic for the rest of your life was insane to me. Just insane. And so we set out to do something different. And, you know, I think those options have to be available. And that's why I'm so excited about this center that Steve and I are working on in Arkansas, is that for the first time in the history of our country, we could have a St. Jude's Children's Hospital version for mental brain health, where veterans or anyone can come and get the kind of help that they need. Specifically, it's not going to be a one size fits all, but it's going to be more holistic health and well-being with social connection. And these programs, like, I've been doing this for a long time, and they really work.
Yeah,
all sizes fit one.
I think
every tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge too is that you know, whenever you cross over into psychiatry or psychopathology, you know, you also have to think about the fact psychopathology has been around a long time. There are modalities that have been around a long time, and what has essentially happened is we've taken one that was already existing in PTSD, and we tried to fit veterans into this diagnosis and this treatment modality, when In reality, the veteran experience is very different from any trauma that you're ordinarily trying to treat here with civilian population. And so part of the challenge, I think, is it is a unique challenge that veterans face. They've seen unique things, and so the approach to veteran suicides and PTSD in the veteran community, I think it has to be different. We have to think about it differently because we're trying to take a civilian model and make it fit military personnel, which is not a good fit.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Great.
And then therefore, by definition, it includes veterans helping veterans.
Mhm.
Which is also a huge, seems to me like a
Yeah.
huge thing.
That's what I was going to kind of nail on, is just that, like, that's, I mean, throughout the film, that was what was the anchor. Social workers there. She went through Stephen went through a great program, had a great social worker, but at the end of the day, the thing that saved him was not the social worker. It was the veteran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His father-in-law who was in Vietnam.
Yep. And so I think I actually, stealing a quote from the film, I wrote it down as I was watching it yesterday, and I think this is a message that I think all veterans, I think, need to hear, and anybody going through a struggle, is that the will of God won't take you, or the grace of God won't save you. And I think that's that like, when I heard that, I just like stopped. I don't know whether you said it or one of the other characters said it, but I just like stopped and wrote that down. It was just like profound. And I think that more people that hear that and they really process what that means, is that no matter what you go through, you can survive it.
Yeah.
There's another side to this, and you can come out of the back end okay. So
Right. No, that's
Yeah,
a beautiful line. Right.
The whole concept of grace or gratitude is really important when you're talking about, normalizing a path forward for yourself. When you get into that hope and purpose, it's hard to find hope and purpose without grace and gratitude. And so I think that's that's something that we certainly focus on in the LifeScore app, but then also just in general. And again, it gets kind of into that mindset thing. I want to say one more thing that you guys can make comments on. As I mentioned, we've had many of the veterans from our program have seen the movie, and one of them watched it last night and wrote me quite a long note. I won't read all of it, but I want to read some of it because I think it's going to strike a nerve with the people that are going to watch this podcast. So what he said was, it brought insight to some of the things that returning combat vets are going through. He suffered from PTSD, but also brought to the forefront traumatic brain injury and CTE and how that affects people. It also features a Vietnam era combat veteran who had some of the issues that he went through, especially returning home with his PTSD. The key message was that the therapist wasn't there to fix him, but to present options that perhaps he hadn't tried in the past to help him find his way. So I thought that was pretty. I'll let you take that, Dominic.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's exactly, when I said we wanted to speak to the veteran community, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that response is very good to hear, and I'm thrilled that it's landing that way, and it's just like I said, it's just a chance the film is a chance to talk about something in a way that maybe most Americans aren't talking about, and I think veterans like it because it speaks truthfully to their experience, but hopefully it'll speak to everybody in terms of just the importance of this topic. I mean, they're really, what could be more important than what we're talking about right now, you guys? I mean, this is as important an issue as any that we have. And I don't think in general we're talking about it enough. So I just want to say thank you to all of you. Victor, thank you for all that you're doing. And
Thank you, Victor.
JW and Steve and Derek for your service and for everything you've done and then you continue to do, because that's the thing. I mean, war, there's another line in the film, and it's not an original thought, but war doesn't end when you come home, It's something that stays. Of course, it's a profound experience, and all veterans respond differently, and not all veterans are going to need the services that we're talking about. Obviously, that's important to mention too. But for those that will, hopefully, this movie will start a conversation in which maybe that'll start to happen a little bit more. I don't know, but it's
I would.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's safe to say that this movie's going to spark a lot of conversation. And, it really is like, there's been a few movies out recently, but that really are like when I watch the parts that I've seen of Sheepdog, I mean, I see so many veterans that I've helped over the years that are reflected in that main character. I mean, thousands, literally thousands. And, every single one of them that wrote me a note after seeing the movie have had very similar thoughts and very similar sentiments to the one that I read you. That's what, I read that. And the parents that were on our podcast last week also went and saw the movie and had some things to say. And, they definitely recognize in that main character a lot of characteristics that their sons were going through.
Yeah.
So it really hits the mark.
Thank you for that. And that's a credit to Stephen Graham. I mean, as I said, he took a decade to get this right. He went all over the country and spoke with so many veterans in all different communities. And also the work he did at the VA, he got to role play with all kinds of therapists and doctors and counselors. And he just soaked it all up. And the script is absolutely 100% informed by all of that. So I think that's why it resonates, because it's true, because it came from the mouths of the people he met.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having him on the podcast as soon as possible. He was supposed to be on today, but I'm not sure if something came up. But
I think
we
he
definitely
and
want
Matt
to have him on.
Dallas, who's also in the film, I think they're traveling. I think they had a program in maybe Omaha, somewhere in the middle of the country, and I'm not sure where they're. I mean, I've been on the road a bit with it. They're on the road even more, so I don't even really know where they are right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're working on schedules right now to get them on next week at some point. And I'll let you know when it happens. And if you can join again, we would always love to have you. I never get tired of having you around, Dominic.
Yeah.
And I got your name right this time.
If we could only do it and get on a bike at the same time, then it'd be.
Well, I mean, at least of all the people here, you've actually come to one of my rides, so I got to hand it to you for that. So
I'll never forget it. That was awesome, man.
Yeah, it was quite fun, and it was great because we also had Mark and Tig there as well. So it was a good thing.
It's good to know, though, Dominic, that in a pinch you'll answer to Derek too. So that's good to know.
That's right.
And I didn't know I was a famous movie actor. So
there we go.
Well, that's great.
Awesome.
I appreciate everybody's time and being invited to join this thing today.
Same here. Thank you. This has been amazing. I don't get to hang out with veterans like this very often, so this was really cool.
Thanks.
Well, now you get to hang out more because now you're part of the Life Aid group. People join, they don't leave.
I'll take it.
It's such a welcoming. I mean, we've seen a couple of really nice comments from some of our past participants in the chat on our YouTube channel. And, I'm always grateful for the mark that, if you do something and it makes a difference, and I'm sure, Dominic, you feel this way in the movies that you've done, when it makes a mark on someone and you get that feedback from a veteran that says, hey, man, this movie, this role really touched me, really motivated me. I mean, that it just means the world to you.
It absolutely does. It's the reason above all else why I want to be a part of these projects, and I'll never not want to do that because it's so important and it feels so rewarding. I get something out of it too. I just know how grateful I am to our military and that's everybody involved in this project. Virginia Madsen is a Gold Star family member. Vondi was named, he told us he was named for the man who saved his father's life in World War II. As I told you, my uncle served 2 tours in Vietnam. Stephen's got tons of military in his family, as does Matt Dallas. I mean, everybody who's been a part of this, it's a personal, this was an independent film. Nobody got rich making this movie, but it's something we feel very deeply about. And any chance I get to be a part of something like that, I will jump at it.
I see a future role for you playing the character of Steve Brignoli.
Steve Brignoli?
That's me. Yeah, I've got.
Your last name is.
I've got a last name like you, where there's more vowels than consonants. Because
that's a good name, man. I didn't know that was your last name. It just says Steve on your video.
Yeah, Steve Brignoli. So
Oh, cool.
Italian,
Well, I would love it.
New York Italian.
We gotta write that story.
Oh, it's a little. That'd be an epoch, but yeah, I appreciate it.
You gotta master the beard though, Dominic. That's gonna be the challenge.
Well,
It's a plug and
strong.
play. You can put it on. I'll just give you mine. You just
That's a strong
pop it on.
I've
There's
done that in
2
the past.
pins right here.
Yeah.
No,
It's
I got a
easy.
good beard. I just need you got to give me a couple months. I'll be there.
Hey,
All right.
if you saw him in 13 hours, he had a nice
Yeah.
beard.
We all
Yep.
had beards. Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, once we get this Arkansas thing going, then I'll have to make a movie about it for sure.
Yeah.
Be
It
be
sounds-
unbelievable.
It sounds amazing, man. It's really great.
we're doing.
Congrats.
In the meantime, how much time do we have, JW? You want to wrap up, or I was going to talk to him about the armories?
Go ahead, take it away. We don't have a time limit other than when people have to go eventually.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna have
it's
to
just
leave
for the
in
audience
just a few.
too, and for
Yeah.
future.
Sorry. Go ahead, Steve. I
ahead,
also,
sorry.
Victor was saying he's going to have to leave in a few minutes. I think I will too.
Yeah.
It's about 4:30 here. But
Yeah.
go. I want to. What? Go
2
ahead.
minutes, not even
Yeah.
90 seconds. So what we're I came up with the idea to, this facility is going to take a while. But we need to start now. So using, we'll probably kick off in the Hot Springs area with an armory there, but having 1 weekend a month coordinated with National Guard units, all the legalese and all that stuff taken care of, but having co-using the National Guard Armory as a facility to have a mental health center. And it's very simple. You just start out, you come in, hey, it's kind of a meet and greet. I'd like it to where these armories are kind of set up like a pre-deployment center, because then it gets that veteran in that mindset. Dominic, when you go to do a scene or whatever, you have to like immerse yourself in that situation, emotionally and mentally, so you're prepared to correctly, render what the story is. Same here. If we have the armories with the tents and the camo nets and stuff, and everything set up like a pre-deployment, this will allow the veteran to kind of relive and kind of get them back in that space where their eventual PTSD or PTSC problems started. And you can kind of gently reverse engineer some of that just by setting at the armory. You have other veterans there. This can be part of the medical training for the medical folks who are in the National Guard unit. They can see it. You can have every person as part of that unit can help set that up and see what we're doing. So they become part of the collective, and it's almost like a mental stone soup, if you will, where you get communities of interest that come together, locals, and then local veterans can come in just to say, from different eras, just to say, what's this about? Just ask the question. We can start out with things simple, like starting with John's app, the Life Score app. This is what this does, and this is why it's effective. 40,000+ veterans saved over 17 years. Well, 3,000 plus are on this app, and here's what they're saying about it. And it's just the first step. You get people to a location. That's the immersion part. You get them around community. That's the advocacy part, and it breaks them free of some of those shackles of of feeling the requirement to be isolated because they're the only one going through their situation. Okay. And we start to break down these little traps and wickets they've built for themselves inside their head to start to alleviate the situation and then start to heal the situation through follow-up. So
Yeah,
that's all I want to talk about.
that sounds amazing. That sounds like a great endeavor, man. And so how
The
close?
best
how
thing
close
about
are-
it is the best thing about it is it's scalable.
Yeah.
Because these armories are all over the country. They're in almost every community in every state. And it gives you a place where, because you got to have a place where people can come.
Yeah.
And then you can do hiking and biking and mountain
Yeah.
biking and kayaking or whatever it is, or hyperbaric therapy or whatever you can do. Like each place will have its own capability. And then we have this main center that will build, that'll have everything, including hot springs, which is kind of cool. But
What were you gonna say?
I'm sorry. I'm already late for my next one, so I'm gonna have to jump. But I appreciate the conversation. Thank you all so much. This has been
Thank you.
fantastic. JW, you got my number. Anytime you need me, call me.
you're always going to be
All
invited.
right. Thank you.
Great to talk to you, Victor.
Great to
Thank you.
talk to you too.
Yeah,
Thank
take
you,
Take care,
gentlemen.
Victor.
Bye.
Yep.
Getting in my circle is a blessing and a curse, depending on how it is.
It's all good. It's all
Well-
good. Anyway, when do you hope, I mean, realistically, when do you think you may start the hot springs,
We're planning an event right now for March 19th to the 22nd. You guys will all get an invite to come out. We're going to do some mountain biking. We're going to do hiking, some road biking. We'll have the hot springs. I have my functional medicine team that's going to come and do evaluations so that vets can get evaluated and get some information about their health. Obviously, we have the app. So we're just trying to show like what these armory programs could look like so that, people have an idea. And then, I've done a lot of work with the National Guard, so I have relationships with most of the tags. And so, they all have their integrated prevention program staffs and they're all looking for things like this to get involved in. So it's something that we can scale up pretty fast, and it's completely holistic.
right,
Yep.
right. It's amazing. Sounds like a great program, man.
Yeah, we need to talk to that guy, Tim Jensen. We need to get some Gruntstyle SOAR shirts made and start selling them and raise money.
Yeah.
That's my boss, Dominic. He's the co-owner of the Gruntstyle. So
Oh, right on.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, you got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, this has been awesome. Dominic, if you want to follow up, I'd love to talk some more and kind of give you some more information on what you talked about in the meds. I think that if you're interested in having a conversation, I'd like to kind of spin you up. You might be surprised the more you learn about this.
Yeah, right on. Okay.
Yep. So,
And I think JW, I hope you'll have Stephen on because he'd be such a good person to continue the conversation with. I mean,
Yeah, I was
He's-
emailing him today, so we're
Yeah,
trying to
he'll-
figure out the schedule when he's available, because we can record him. And Joshua, if you want, you could stop the live now. We can record the session.